It's definitely a fine line. Like I said, like one of my scariest adventures for me when ultra running was the Arctic, definitely. And I know there was points where I'm like, maybe I should just stop. Or there were SUVs with EMTs in them, and you could push, your little SOS button on your GPS button. But thank God I never had to do that, but some of the racers did. And I know, if I had to, I would. It gets to the point where you want to achieve that adventure, but you also have to take into account, like, I want to see my son again. I
Yeah.
want to see my family, and I don't there. So there's always that fine line where you're pushing the limits, but you don't want to go that extreme or you lose your life. Having them experience that those endurance events, and even if it's something like a 5K or 10K, I mean, just having them be outside and be engaged in that movement. um, there's also, I have friends that work with something. They have disorders where if they stop, they have arthritic pain, but they realize, by doing ultras, movement is medicine. I remember I fell asleep, and you could sleep, you could bivvy out or 10 out on the side of the ice road. And I did that after so many hours of moving. But I remember waking up, my core freezing. I'm in a fetal position with my hands, like I said, in my armpits, anywhere I could get warmth. And just this, I remember falling asleep and having a nightmare that I lost my fingers.
Hey there, folks. I'm Sifu Slim, and I am on my annual ski trip. And I've got my Vail t-shirt on here. And I'm over at Keystone, which is about 25 minutes away from Vail. And we have reasonably good conditions. It snowed about 4 inches up top 6 days ago. We could use some more snow. So if anyone's out there in the next few days, if you could do a snow dance for me and the people here and the people in the Western Rockies, I would sure appreciate it. What does this trip do to me? It's a mind, body, spirit connection. It's an incredibly challenging thing. When I was 18 and 20, it was challenging. Imagine being 61 and navigating down blue and black slopes in conditions that you have to watch out for the other people out there. You have to watch out for rocks and trees and uneven surfaces. It's a really fun way to challenge yourself. And if you're fit, and if you're ready for it and you're prepared, which I have a whole year to prepare, it's only 10 days to 2 weeks that I'm going to be here. That's a whole year, 300 some days I can prepare. Hallelujah. If I did my job, the rest is a rejoicing, wonderful winter wonderland experience in the snow in Colorado. So that's where I am over in Keystone. I'm going to bring in Nate Dirvin, who's going to tell us where he is. Interestingly enough, I'm excited to hear because I can't remember if he told me. I'm from New Jersey originally. The person who referred me to Nate is in New Jersey currently, or is he in Philadelphia? You'll have to tell me. And tell us where you are, Nate.
Thanks, Sifu. This is Nate Durbin. Thanks for the quick introduction. I'm actually in Philadelphia. That's where I grew up, originally from here. Dan Rosenek he lives in Ambler. I know he's originally from North Jersey, and that's who connected me with you for this podcast. So, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you aboard. And your friend and my interview guest from about a month and a half ago has moved from a typical, more of a typical job into the healing arts, therapeutic arts. And maybe you can tell me what you thought when he shared that with you, Nate.
I thought that was a good life choice for Dan. I've met Dan through, I actually met Dan in the middle of the ocean in Atlantic City, paddling. We were both paddling around Absecon Island or Atlantic City in New Jersey. But I think that's a good choice for Dan because we've also gone on runs through trails together. And I know Dan can be very spiritual and very fitness oriented. So I think it's a great choice for Dan to go into, health and healing and wellness in that area of it for his life.
So another interesting thing, Nate, is that we haven't shared what you do, but so I'm gonna play a little clip from YouTube and try to see if the viewers can guess what Nate is all about.
You know it's going to hurt at some stage, yet you're willing to expose yourself to that pain. So what's really unique about endurance performance is that kind of element of how do I manage my thoughts? There's so much time to think. So when those kind of demons might arrive, how do you manage those demons? Some people undertake extreme endurance activities because of something that they have control over. They have a very clear reason, and it's because they want to do it. They enjoy the exercise. They enjoy kind of those challenges when we think about managing pain. They just love it. Some other people, they do it because of the community around it.
There will be highs and there will be lows.
So Nate, what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about right now is the psychological profile of people who are in endurance sports. And we just got to hear from some sports psychologists from a university in London. And they talk about, the people want to be in a group activity and they go to these events. And what a fun thing to do. Like my annual ski trip, people in your field, it could be every week that they're going to a new event, or every month, and they get to see the same people they competed against, and people who are in different age groups, and they can learn from them. Or if they're a younger person, they might share some wisdom with that younger person. So they've got that connection with the same group of people as you do, being in the Coast Guard and seeing people over the years. And then they also talked about the time to think and the dealing with your demons and the challenges. So maybe you could tell us about how you got into endurance sports and if you fit into some of those groups as far as your interest level in pursuing that activity of being an ultra runner.
Yes, thank you again for elaborating or getting into the sport of ultra running and endurance events. Excuse me. How I broke into the sport. I wasn't always athletic. Actually, growing up in Philadelphia, I kind of was doing the opposite. I was into getting into smoking cigarettes, being unhealthy with my body, drinking. But then in college, well, first high school, I had this idea to join the rowing team. I just had this inkling that somewhere, if I worked out, that would exercise and went into exercise activities, it would be mentally healing or even, better for me. Just of my overall wellness mentally and physically. So I broke into it in high school with the sport of rowing. From rowing, I gained confidence to go into wrestling. I figured I could get into something even more physical than rowing. But both sports were the catalyst for me to become an ocean lifeguard and also row in college. But then I started, gaining more confidence that I could go farther, go longer, and my mindset changed where first I never thought I could do these things. And then just gradually building up to, let's say, like a 5K, a 10K, as far as running a marathon. Before that was a half marathon, but just sort of doubling down on my distances, I'd like to say. I think it's a great sport. You mentioned the community. As far as ultra running, rowing, any type of sport where you're in this group setting where you have to work together, you have to practice team building, problem solving skills. You have great camaraderie. I found this great camaraderie through the sport of ultra running. I found healing in my own life because sometimes I get a bit depressed, especially this time of year in the winter. But engaging your mind and your body.
They call that seasonal affective disorder, something I never knew when I was in high school.
Right.
You learn that over the course of your life. And I don't even know if doctors were talking about that. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in New Jersey with long, dreary 5-month winters with a lot of indoor. I was out hunting and playing football and things, but still, just seeing no leaves on the tree and being cold and clammy, definitely a challenge. And then you get one or two colds and you miss some being in school or this or that, and it can be a challenging winter.
Exactly. And I know the acronym was very fitting for that, SAD, right? Seasonal anxiety disorder. I am a middle school counselor as one of my careers. So I definitely noticed that in this region of the country, as you stated. So it's nice to be out and just getting those endorphins in, that endorphin rush to kind of battle against that, these winter seasons here. So
It's a long lasting thing. So people who train muscles and being a thin guy, kind of a Michael Jackson Gilligan build, I was always trying to gain muscle. And, when I hit 15, 16 and testosterone kicks in and I gained like 40 pounds, I said, oh, this is cool. I'm going to keep going and be a linebacker, right? But I settled in at like 168 to 172. And that's been my weight since age 18. Occasionally I'll get up to 178, 180 when I'm really happy and things are clicking. But I'm just a fat burner type of a person. But the idea of muscle work, which has been a big part of my life, gaining and making those muscles efficient. You do the work and it can last the effect on your psychology and your biochemistry, your neurology. It could last for 3 days that you feel good because of all that work you did. And now the cells, muscle cells and other tissue are building and you've engaged them. And that's an incredible benefit to go through life with one hard piece of work that could last for 3, maybe even 5 days and make you feel good.
yeah, I definitely agree. And I definitely live by that and experience that, especially like you said in the winter months. Would I like to be somewhere warmer? Sure. But I stay here for family. My 9-year-old son, who I love to death, is here. So, I'll stay in this area. Maybe I always say when I retire, maybe I'll move down to Florida or out to California or something. But I mean, there's ways to get through. It's not like this is the worst place to live. I actually do enjoy living here. But like we're talking about, the winter months can be a little mentally draining. But if you know how to combat that through the exercise, through health and wellness, it's definitely manageable.
A little before your time, Nate, but maybe you remember Bobby Orr, famous hockey player, started with the Boston Bruins. I think he was 14 when he got drafted. He didn't play until he was 17, I believe, in the NHL, maybe 18. But he talks about, being out on the frozen lake in Perry Sound or the rivers all day long. So imagine that. I don't even know if these guys brought sandwiches with them, because if it's 10 degrees outside, your sandwich is going to freeze. So maybe they had to head into town or head to a friend's house for some soup and a sandwich, and then they'd be back out there. And they didn't play a blasting type of hockey where you're really cracking into people. They played a lot of shimmy, which is keep away. So guy or gal that was the best skater and could control that puck could keep it a long time. And that's what Bobby Orr's skill it was. And when he started playing more organized hockey, he could use that, and they put him as a defenseman eventually, so he could run the show when his line was out on the ice for the 2-minute period and feed the puck and control it. It was a great thing. But he talks about, his temperature compared to New Jersey was another 10 to 20 degrees colder, and he's out all day long as a 10-year-old kid. So I guess there's this word called acclimation, and not knowing any better. Like, the bird in the cage maybe doesn't know. I'm not saying to put birds in cages, but it's just the way things are. If you're in something and you're doing it, you don't think twice about it. Your thoughts over to you, Nate.
As you're thank you, Sifu. As you're mentioning all this, it reminded me of something, sort of a good segue. But I remember around this time last year, in February going into March, I was in the Arctic, Canadian Arctic. When you mentioned frozen food, I remember trying to figure out what to bring in those type of sub-freezing conditions. I mean, we're talking temperatures like you're mentioning, negative 20 to negative 40 Fahrenheit. So I remember I tried to bring a sandwich in the sled. I was pulling a sled or a polk up the Dempster Highway, trying to go hundreds of miles, ultimately try to go 380 miles. But I remember, like, the further I got, the more days I got into that event, the food, anything I brought, unless it was dark chocolate, I could sort of break that, or trail mix. If I had a sandwich or a hoagie, like we say in Philadelphia, in the sled that I pulled over to try to get out, it was a brick. I couldn't even, there was no way to eat that. Honestly, at one point I was just sort of eating some snow for hydration, because even my water bottles froze because they weren't sealed and weren't such great seals. So that sort of brings up that. But as you're mentioning Bobby Orr and the mindset, I said, I guess he didn't know any better. And the word acclimate, I didn't know much better myself. It's cold in Philadelphia, but not that type of cold like you would experience in the Arctic. So in a way, I guess it was sort of like ignorance bliss. I was forced to acclimate. And sort of in a lot of ways, just practice a lot of grit and different type of mindset to get through that. But you definitely reminded me of something that was on my mind when you mentioned the cold and Bobby Orr and acclimating.
Yeah, when I think about having a cold or being cold, it's a few steps in the direction of death. You know how quickly you die. I watched the Deadliest Catch, where they're going out for crab and for there's two different types of crab that they're going for. And if somebody falls in, they know that it's very likely that person's going to die because it's ice conditions. There's ice on the boat, there's ice out in the ocean, and they're up in the Arctic area, off of Alaska. And so cold is in the direction of death. You know how if you're sweaty and the clouds come in and it's fall or winter or early spring, that you get cold very quickly. And if you're wet, it's even worse. And you say, what if this doesn't let up? And I'm out here and I'm, 10 miles from my automobile. You know that you have a risk that's severe because if your fingers start going, you start to lose your concentration, your focus, your brain doesn't work properly. And your core, once your core starts getting cold, you know that the clock is ticking on, you meeting your demise. Same thing if you have like a nasal infection and it's just shutting you down, then it goes into your bronchial tubes. You're basically a sick person. And when I've talked to people who, as a counselor, you've probably dealt with cancer before. When people are talking about a sibling or a parent who's going through cancer and they've got stage 4, an advanced type of cancer, I tell them, I said, look, you're looking at your mom, and I know you care about your mom, and you want the best for them, but when you think about it, do you really want to have a rotten flu for many more years? Or do you want to just go out right now with your cancer and not have to deal with being unwell each and every day and maybe going through chemo, radiation, all of these harsh invasive type things? So over to you on the relationship to having a cold and being cold and thinking about not living the following hour or the following day.
And thanks for bringing that up as well, Sifu. Because as you're mentioning all this and being in pain and sort of the word suffering comes to mind. I have these talks with other friends that do endurance events, especially in extreme temperatures like the cold. The other day we were talking about hypothermia, like you mentioned, frostbite. These are the big worries on my mind during that event I just mentioned. And I've also done an event in Wyoming, same thing, pulling a sled 100 miles.
Wow.
And you're worried. I mean, you're constantly wiggling your fingers. I call it playing the piano to keep the circulation going. Even with 3 layers of gloves, you mentioned being wet. I mean, what starts to happen is the more layers you have, you start to sweat further into the race and days longer into the event. So then the big thing becomes now your hands are freezing from the sweat, even though you're trying to layer them up and keep them warm. So when I was in the Arctic, the big thing was frostbite, right? So I remember I fell asleep, and you could sleep, you could bivvy out or tent out on the side of the ice road. And I did that after so many hours of moving. But I remember waking up, my core freezing. I'm in a fetal position with my hands, like I said, in my armpits, anywhere I could get warmth. And just this, I remember falling asleep and having a nightmare that I lost my fingers.
Oh.
And I never forget, I woke up with blisters all over my fingers. So maybe it was my mind or subconscious telling me like, get up and start moving again. But whatever happened, and I still have them all. I'm very lucky, but there was a lot of scares. By the time I finished that race, my thumbs were black, so that they scabbed over and peeled off. There's probably still a little bit of nerve damage, but it's a thing, right? And it's something to keep in mind in life too. And to answer your question about cancer and just being cold and illnesses, it's something where you wouldn't wish it on anybody, obviously. But I also turned to what a friend and I talked about the other day, and it's suffering. I feel like sometimes in order to find yourself, there's suffering and growth. Suffering is sometimes needed. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a masochist where I want to go out there and purposely get hurt, but challenging yourself sometimes can lead to growth. And that sometimes I think about it like that. But obviously there are risks, and the old theme of risk versus reward, connection to extreme events, extreme athletics, and just this mindset where you're trying to challenge yourself mentally and physically. But how far is too far, right? Like you're mentioned, you don't want to risk your death to that point. But I think sometimes there's also that side of it where you're finding yourself and you're finding your limitations, or you're finding your potential and growth. So that's what comes to mind.
So we've had the chance right in the beginning to listen to, there are two sports psychologists, both younger females, I would guess late 20s, early 30s. One person is named Dr. Emily Martin, sports psychologist, St. Mary's University, Twickenham in London. And the other person is Dr. Carla Maijan, also sports psychologist at the same university. And I looked at these videos this morning, and actually this one's a nice short one. So I'm going to see if I can go back right now and bring that up. And here's some more thoughts about people who are endurance athletes and extreme endurance athletes, and what that mindset is all about. And then we'll hear Nate's comments about that.
Being able to navigate and manage that is a real psychological strength. Completing these endurance events, we learn psychological techniques that can be used in our lives outside of sport. So understanding that we have an end goal, but we need to have a journey towards getting towards that end goal, and recognizing those small achievements along the way.
You know, when we think about reflecting on reasons why you're doing it, having that kind of intrinsic motivation that comes from within, managing those negative thoughts, the perseverance, the grit to keep going, but also, yes, I might feel uncomfortable, I feel tired, but I can push through that, can be types of things that can be really helpful in other areas of life.
I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm known as King of the English Channel. I've swum the channel 34 times, and within that 34 there are actually 3 doubles and 28 singles. People want to challenge their human frailties. I know I can beat the demons in my head which say, you can't do this. I know I can beat those.
More people have climbed Everest than they have swum the channel. So it's a huge challenge. You could literally get like a kilometre away from France and the current will just change and you'd be swimming stationary, and you've got to be okay with swimming another 6 hours. So when I went to swim.
So Nate, anything resonate with you from the sports psychologists or from the athletes, and what they commented on about the challenges and dealing with demons, etc.?
Yes, thank you for the visual for that, Sifu. A few things just on the surface right there, what they're talking about. I have had a few friends that have climbed Everest, and I know that's a magnificent feat, as well as meeting people who swam the English Channel. I also have, I've gone on runs with a Sear Chimnoy group in New York. He connected with mental and physical stamina, the interconnectedness. So that group does a run, for instance, like 3,100 miles in New York City around a block in Queens, the self-transcendence race. So I've met the winner of that. I've met other individuals who have ran that and also swam the channel. So that's all that resonates for me, those experiences of me meeting those people. And as far as sports psychology, but when I meet those individuals, they have this sort of glistening look on their face. Like they've not only challenged their body, but it's all interconnected with their spirit, their mind. So I feel like these demons that are brought up in the video and that you mentioned, we all have something in life, some trauma, I feel like, no matter who we are, we've gone through, whether it was family, the grief or loss. I see that as a counselor. I see it in my own life where I went through a bitter custody battle with my son. And that's one of my big reasons for always doing extreme sports, just a role model to my son, how to overcome challenges in your life. And that these physical challenges can be an analogy for gaining mental strength in other aspects of your life, whether you're trying to transition your career, help other people through charity, which I try to do through the Coast Guard as a member and through these endurance events. So there's all this interconnectedness with our spirit, our mind, and our body. And I think by really pushing ourselves in each aspect, we can become a greater whole as a person. So, and I believe it does help us combat these demons in our life. So that's been my basic take on all this experience, through whether it's endurance paddles, rows, swims, like half Ironmans or runs. I just keep that mindset, and I kind of feel like it's endorphins, but it's also a sense of bliss and a sense of accomplishment, even when you're in the middle of the race. I try to focus on that moment rather than the finish line, the journey of it. So that's what I've experienced in my personal life with it.
I'm going to share a little bit about your bio, Nate. So in 2021 and 22, Nate completed the triple crown of 200 miles, I'm guessing, correct?
Yes.
And plus the Badwater 135 miles both years. Also in 2022, completed the Grand Slam of the 200s with the Cocodona and the triple, and was elated to have accomplished the Drift 100 and a slew of other graduate level 100 milers, leading to the ultra sign up. Data from most hours raced totaling almost 24 days or 598 hours of running in that same year. So he still has a job, still doing the Coast Guard, still being a dad, still being a volunteer, maybe has a girlfriend, I don't know, but pretty busy guy. And so share with us, Nate, just, I'm just touching the surface on some of the things that you've done. Share with us how in these recent years you've done all of these things, and what the schedule was like.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the intro to the bio, seafood. For me, I think it's definitely juggling. It's definitely trying to be creative with my schedule and fit it all in. It was a pretty hectic schedule, but all well worth it to achieve a goal. I think last year I was definitely focusing on doing at least one ultra marathon, or some months in December, I think it was two. I did two ultras, but trying to juggle all that, it was very challenging. But like I just talked about, it kind of flows to other aspects of life, like what is possible to achieve. I think if you line up your goals and you have a good plan and strategy to execute, it can be achieved. And whether that's an ultra marathon, an endurance paddle, a row, like I said, trying to transition to a career, balance your personal life, work on relationship goals, I think they're all achievable. And I think, the ultra running for me was a great analogy of that. It overcame a lot of mental deficiencies I had. Like I wasn't sure. I didn't always have a lot of confidence. I wasn't sure what I could achieve until I started working at these goals. And I think they're all interrelated. And I think, as I proved, you are able to balance all these things. But you just have to have a good game plan, a good mindset. And there's going to be days where you're definitely struggling and you have that doubt where you're like, I don't know if I should be doing all this. Is this worth it? Why am I doing this? But in the long run, I feel it's worth it to show my son how to role model, how to be a better person. And so even all these events, I was also, like I said, tying them to charity, helping Coast Guard members and their families. So having that's an extra motivator for me. If I tie something in I believe in to a charity, or for my why, basically, that helps me personally. So I think that's a big reason why I was able to achieve all these things.
Wow, fascinating. I'm going to share with you, Nate, the joy I had and the elation. One of my first interviews back in maybe 2009, 2010, I interviewed Dick Hoyt. Familiar with the Team Hoyt?
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So Team Hoyt both have passed on. The father, Dick, born in 1940, I'm reading off of Wikipedia here, and died in 2021. And his son, Rick, they're from Holland, Massachusetts. They completed together in marathons 30 editions of the Boston Marathon and Ironman triathlons. Rick, the son, had cerebral palsy. He was born with the umbilical cord around his neck, so he lost oxygen to his brain, and he
Well,
survived childbirth. And the father, who's a strongly built gentleman like Nate, he former military also, back, I think he was a military guy in the 60s and 70s, and he had a strong body, and he realized that he could push his son and then pull him in swimming. And then what they did is they just started kind of bootlegging their way into these races back in the 80s, I believe, where they weren't allowed to be in. They were the team that opened up distance running and triathlon to people who have disabilities. So the father and son, brothers, whatever, sisters. And so these people were the change makers of a sport, and they had to go through, I don't know, 6 or some years of not being allowed in, and almost having the Gestapo come down and cuff them because the sponsors and the people running these events didn't want that. But one of the things that that Team Hoyt is known for is Dick, the father, said that his son, who was able to get a college diploma, amazingly enough, but couldn't, speak normally, and disabled in many of his physical aspects. He said his son lit up when he was out there being pushed when he was running, or being pulled in the toboggan when he's swimming in the triathlon. So he said he's going to do as many of these things as he can for his son. Over to Nate, and talking about motivation and setting examples for people who are in their development stage that we can impact with some of the endurance type activities and overcoming obstacles in our walk in life.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com, and when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
thank you again, Sifu. So what you just spoke to, it reminds me there was a father-son team in Philadelphia, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I know his son was disabled, and he would push him in the stroller or the cart, which I think it's one of the most inspirational things you can see in the sport, is helping someone and basically getting them to experience, or having them experience that those endurance events. And even if it's something like a 5K or 10K, I mean, just having them be outside and be engaged in that movement. There's also, I have friends that work with something. They have disorders where if they stop, they have arthritic pain, but they realize, by doing ultras, movement is medicine for them. And I think when you make this statement, movement is medicine, that's also not just in a physical sense, it's a mental sense. So I think for your mental health and your mental well-being, I think it's amazing to see these stories. I think, like, again, that's one of the most tear-jerking emotional experiences you can see, is somebody, especially in a father-son or mother-daughter relationship. There's so many incredible stories out there with this, whether it's, like I said, someone pushing someone in a stroller or cart, or even the individuals in wheelchairs that compete in sports. It's just incredible to see these people performing. I know my son Parker, sometimes one year we went down to the shore, New Jersey shore, and we helped with there was a surf healing group where individuals who were paraplegics, Life Rolls On was the group. They would get out and we would help, push them and catch a wave. I mean, just seeing their faces light up, be able to ride a wave, where they usually can't even, they can't walk, but they're able to experience that movement and have that rush. It's just engaging them in what life should be like. So I definitely think there's a basic human element we're all meant to move, and we're all meant to um, be around each other and experience these types of movement. So
Thanks, Nate. One of the things I wanted to share is we talked about seasonal affective disorder, and you called it anxiety disorder, SAD. And some people are indoor living people year round. So, I'm surrounded by drywall here, but I'm in a really quaint Airbnb where they've got historic cross-country skis. I talked to a friend of mine who grew up in Minnesota and a little bit in Montana. And I said, are these 1940s? Because I remember my mother's downhill skis from the 50s when she was in college, and they looked more modern than these. And he said, no, these skis probably could have gone from the 40s until the 60s. They just didn't need to improve them, because cross-country skiing was, you got to strap yourself in, got to be flexible, and then you've got to do this hard endurance work. So you didn't really need to change that. And he said these skis would still work fine today. And that's another thing I wanted to share with you about some of I sent you the Summit of K2 documentary, which is really an inspirational documentary, and a little bit kooky too, because some of these people, they make decisions based on the end goal, where a lot of them stop when they know that they can't go any further, or when the setup isn't right, or the weather's not cooperating, or the Sherpa is telling them that, I've got 10 years of being a Sherpa. No, this is a no-go. We don't do that. But some people, and I don't know what the percentage is, if I had to guess, I would say 15 to 20%. They say, no, I've trained for 3 years and I've funded this thing and I've got my GoFundMe, and I'm going to do it no matter what, even if the ropes aren't set up properly, even if I'm not quite feeling it. And they just keep pushing it. And then they wind up causing damage to other people. And then they wind up dying, which is in this documentary from 2008, 20 some people made it, and 11 or 15 died on the first part of the descent, because they were 2 hours late was one of the reasons, and the ropes weren't set up properly was another one. So, but if I compare people in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and I think his name is Edmund Hillary, going up Everest, and I can't remember the year, you look at the outfits that they had on, which were a lot of animal skins and wool and things that weren't high tech, like the people in this 2008 documentary called The Summit, which is available on YouTube. These people, oxygen bottles, everything, they had it so much harder, in my opinion, than the people in the modern era have it all dialed in. They've got the experiential learning they got from the predecessors for the last 4 decades. So to share with us a little bit about some of the things that I just shared, and see if you can make some sense on pushing limits and technology.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks again, Sifu, for bringing that up. It's interesting you say that, because I was just in the Himalayas, I'm going to say late October, early November. And I did have a chance to visit they have a mountaineering museum, which has all that equipment in it. And it had Sir Edmund Hillary. It had all the Sherpas in there, their bios, just all their successes and failures. It just discussed that, but you could see the equipment. As far as the equipment goes, I was amazed myself seeing that in the museum. Like, they just had these ropes that, weren't, nothing like the material they use now, with the carabiners and the different, the polycarbonate, I believe, if I'm saying that right, but the things are way more advanced, like you mentioned. But for them to manage that it must have been an incredible feat. And just to see that material in the museum was just interesting. I think, and I did watch the documentary The Summit, which was very interesting as well. And you see, they talked about in their timing, because I believe that the year they went up K2, it was a little bit hotter. I wouldn't say the word hot, but it was a little bit warmer. So there was more chance of avalanches, the snow melting. So they were facing that. They were facing maybe not the best technological gear at the time. Um, Probably, it gets better and better. It wasn't like the 70s, but it was probably not that great either. So they had gear issues. I know that they didn't bring enough rope. It looked like some of the equipment they were using wasn't up to par, or they just didn't have enough. So I remember they were cutting rope. They were trying to make do, and like you mentioned, the Sherpas wanted them to turn around, but since they made this investment, they wanted to keep going. And I think the theme, as I'm watching it, is risk versus reward. How much is too much? I get it. You want to finish your adventure. You want to have this great accomplishment, but then you also have to take in consideration like human life and safety. So it's definitely a fine line. Like I said, like one of my scariest adventures for me when ultra running was the Arctic, definitely. And I know there was points where I'm like, maybe I should just stop. Or there were SUVs with EMTs in them, and you could push, your little SOS button on your GPS button. But thank God I never had to do that, but some of the racers did. And I know, if I had to, I would. It gets to the point where you want to achieve that adventure, but you also have to take into account, like, I want to see my son again. I want to see my family, and I don't. So there's always that fine line where you're pushing the limits, but you don't want to go that extreme or you lose your life. And I've had to even stop in races and help other people. So, whether it's hydration, they run out of water, food. I've shared food in the Arctic with individuals. I've been helped. Even out in like Utah, I'm running through Moab, 200 miles. I've had to share supplies, or I've bartered supplies. So it is a theme that comes up in these extreme events. But again, it's always a fine line. So that's part of it. If you want to take on these grandiose adventures, then you also have to be prepared, or as prepared as possible. But just know, the more extreme you go, it's inevitable that something's going to come up where you're going to have to be adaptive or flexible, or even bail out. I mean, you're dealing with Mother Nature, whether that's in the middle of the ocean paddling in a storm, or a snowstorm blows into Moab, Utah, like it did one time when I was out there. So you just have to be prepared as possible, and know your gear and have a backup plan. So that's how I've gotten advice from people that are more experienced than me in that.
Yeah, you put that in a great perspective. Thanks, Nate. Do you remember the year of the documentary I sent you, The Summit?
I believe, was it 2000? I'm going to say 2008.
Correct. Guess what year
Okay.
Edmund Hillary died on January 11th?
I'm going to say that was in the 30s.
He died in
1930s.
2008.
Wow.
So he's born in 1919, died in January 11th, 2008, lived a long life. And his assault with Sherpa mountaineer Tenzing Norgay, he's from New Zealand, Sir Edmund Percival Hillary, became the first climbers confirmed to have reached the summit of Mount Everest. And that's in May 29th of 1953. And he served in the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a navigator during World War II, was wounded in an accident. So, and he also had an athletic background. Common in his day was boxing, and he did that for a time. So, quite an interesting guy. I've read and watched documentaries. I've read articles about Hillary. I'm sure he's written a book, or people have written many about him. So I'm going to read some more about Edmund Hillary and try to gain something from these people. Decision making, challenging myself, organizing the things that I have to do. I've been a golfer my whole life, and I switched over to tennis as more of a regular practice, mainly because of time and money. Golf is expensive in terms of funding it, and it's very time consuming. So tennis, you can get it done in an hour and a half if you're going at it pretty well, and you're done. And if you find in America, thank goodness, public courts are oftentimes free. In many countries around the world, it's reasonable prices as compared to, going to a nice golf course, which could be $200 today for a greens fee. Who knows what it could be 10 years from now? So, share with me what your thoughts are on planning out these challenges that you put yourself through, and how you do it. Do you have a laptop? Do you have a smartphone? Are there applications that help you plan out your diet, your transit, your hotel, your hydration, the distances, that type of thing.
Okay, yep, thank you. It is an interesting, and it's definitely part of the the whole journey with that. I've definitely honed in on my planning. I will admit, when I first started out, I was a little bit fly by the seat of my pants because it was just mentally so overwhelming trying to, for instance, imagine how to finish a 200-mile race in Moab, Utah, when, you know, there are aid stations every 20 to 30 miles, but within those aid stations, you put drop bags. So trying to figure out how to plan would go in each drop bag, which would usually be warm clothes, cold weather clothes, depending on the elevation. You have to study, you know, the terrain, the maps beforehand, how many calories to bring, what type of electrolytes, what type of fuel. Now, the aid stations will provide food and water and sometimes electrolyte mix, but maybe there's something that won't agree with your stomach there. You want to sometimes have a backup, like your own nutrition. One of my go-tos, I touched on this before, was trying to find an experienced ultra runner or endurance athlete or someone who's done these challenges and pick their brain. I know there's two types, you know, there's more organized people out there, more than me even, that you know, they'll create spreadsheets like you mentioned. So I have a friend, Brian, he's been doing it for a while. And so I'll like just ask, can I see your spreadsheet? You know, like little people that I know have a high success rate of these. I'll look at what they're doing and try to emulate that. There's been times where I might have ordered some stuff maybe from Amazon where last minute that I probably should have thought about more ahead of time. So I'm guilty of it too. Like, but what I usually do is if I hone in on my weaknesses from the previous event. So if there's something I missed, I write it down, how I can work on that and plan better for next time. Like I said, I was just in the Himalayas. I had a 100-mile stage race through Darjeeling region in West Bengal. So planning for that, I had like 2 military sea bags. I ended up just taking one with me. I was trying to pack light because I had to do you know, a long flight out there and then, you know, smaller domestic flights. So just me trying to plan all that. I usually get with friends that are doing the event too, and we'll pick each other's brain. But that's just collaborating with people that have done it for a while helps me a lot. And just thinking of basics, like you said, your nutrition for the Arctic. If it's a cold weather one, obviously too, you need a lot more gear. I did have 2 military bags for that one, because you have to have a sled, you have to have, you know, all you have to have something to cook with in case you get really stuck, light a fire. It's almost like a big camping trip, but you're just moving, you know, you're running and pulling a sled for so long. So it's definitely through experience you get better, like anything else in life. And there is a lot that goes into it. And I can't imagine what these mountaineers go through with just trying to climb, and like the ice picks and the ladders, they have to cross these crevices. So yeah, it's all just, it's not only you have to be in shape and train that way, but you have to know your gear pretty much.
Yeah, definitely. Have you had many experiences where you show up to the race and you said, you know what, I've got everything dialed in and I'm feeling good. The nutrition's there. I've planned it out. My shoes feel good. My running shoes feel good. And I think this is like almost like perfection of planning and mindset and body, and just like everything's clicking. Have you had those experiences?
I have, especially 100 milers. Now I have a few 100 milers coming up, one in Florida and one in Minnesota next month, in January. But after, what starts to happen to me is after doing like a 380-mile in the Arctic with all that gear, I'm like, all right, even though 100-mile is hard, it is challenging. I'll never say, I think a marathon can be challenging because you're going at a faster pace. But if you're doing something that long and then dropping back to something, to use the word shorter for lack of a better word, 100 miles, I'm like, okay, that's less than a weekend. That's more manageable because it's like going to something really, really extreme and then dialing it back. I think more these days, 100 miles, I feel more dialed in, even though it is a faster pace. But gear wise, it's a lot more manageable than going, let's say, out to Washington State, Mount St. Helens. I've done that, and you have like 15 drop bags, you know, interdispersed with cold weather, warm weather, you know, batteries, packs for lighting, just basically survival gear. But yes, it has gotten more manageable, and I think I have felt better doing these 100 milers now where I can manage myself and manage my equipment better. I think, but that line of thinking saying everything will work out, I do have it, but I always kind of keep in the back of my mind, like anything can go wrong at any given time, especially the more extreme you go, even 150 miler. And, you just always have to be prepared. And I have that mindset where I figure something will go wrong, like Murphy's Law. Not that I'm going to be a fatalist or be too negative, but I just keep that in the back of my mind. Just always be flexible and keep your mood up and be grateful to be out there, because something will probably go wrong, but just have a backup plan.
Laces versus Velcro. Is it all people with laces, or do some people try Velcro to keep their footwear tight down to their feet?
I've seen most of the time, so I wear different brands, but I haven't come across too much Velcro. It's for me, I know the brands I buy, it's been all laces. I do wear things like gaiters, especially when it's dirt trail or rocks or snow, just to keep out the dirt and snow. So that helps a lot, but that'll secure it more. And people will other runners or racers will have Velcro to secure those gaiters around their trail shoe. So there's Velcro in that aspect, but I usually just see laces.
Got it. I'm going to tap back in, see if I can get to these psychologists again and hear a thought. I think they're going to talk about autolysis and catabolism.
Okay.
Camp, everyone's very hardcore. I said I wanted to do a 4 hour, and they said, yeah, okay, go for your 4 hour.
I was never a great swimmer. I was never very fast, and I was never especially fit. And yet I'm in the Swimming Hall of Fame. Now, how can that be? Well, it's because I had that willpower, that mental toughness to be able to carry on. And that's what I try to instill in all the swimmers that I train. Swimming the channel, you actually go way, way beyond what you think are your limits. It's not really a physical thing so much as a mental thing.
You had to swim for a long time before you got kind of any food. I just remember being really miserable. It was about 7-8 degrees. Putting my face in the water, it just felt like it was burning. I'd be so frozen I couldn't move my hands.
What you take away from a channel swim is that mental toughness, that self-belief. You also take away a physical development of your body. I had an artery that ruptured. Because my heart was so strong and so big, a much bigger muscle than normal because of the swimming, that's why I'm here. I wouldn't have survived otherwise.
If we know that we've been able to overcome hard times, we've been able to push through some of those difficulties, then we know we can do it again. What motivates us is very different for each individual person. In terms of extreme endurance activities, it's an opportunity for individuals to test their limits and to see where their boundaries are.
My next challenge is probably going to be my business or going on to do another kind of sports swim. And so if you think about life, take that kind of mental attitude of saying, 50% of life is just saying that you can do it or you will do it, but you just have to believe it.
Short little video. One of the things that the senior channel swimmer talked about is, having a big heart muscle from swimming. What I know, and I've watched a fair number of videos on heart sizes, that we all have a heart, and a lot of people talk about the fact that you put your two fists together. That's a pretty good average of what it will be the size of your heart. So if somebody's a big guy like him and he's got big hands, he may have already had a big heart. If I do what he does, and my heart's not going to grow 30 or 40 or 50%, I don't know what the percentage is. It's going to be very small. But he's also a person that he and the person he was training have a lot of adipose tissue on their body naturally. They eat and they put that tissue on. And most of the swimmers who do these cold swims are built like these people. I think the older gentleman or someone else that does the English Channel swim, I watched maybe 15, 20 years ago, he said, I lost 38 pounds of fat and some other tissue probably as well, going across the English Channel. Now, I certainly at 170 and vacillating between 165 and 178, I don't have 38 pounds of adipose tissue to lose, so that wouldn't be a good sport for me. So those are the words I wanted to mention: catabolism, breaking down tissue, and autolysis, auto self lysis, eating. You're eating your own tissue, and so you've experienced this, and you've heard other runners bonking, where they run out of glycogen, they run out of the ability to convert their fat stores, and so they start breaking down muscle and other tissue in this bonking that they do, and it affects your mind, and it affects your coordination, and your excretion of bodily fluid. So talk to us, if you would, Nate, about some of this some of these types of episodes that happen in these endurance sports.
Thank you again, Sifu. I definitely have experienced the word or the term bonking. I've experienced that, especially these longer ultra runs and even paddles. Um, when you bring up this, it makes me think. I am a bigger guy. I am usually around 210 pounds, 205 pounds if I'm really heavy in the
What
training.
height?
I'm a little 6'3".
Wow, you're a
So
big dude. Yeah.
I'm a bigger guy, and I'll hear jokes from friends like, "Is there a Clydesdale division?" I'm like, maybe there should be sometimes, because they're like, no one's like, "You're a runner." I'm like, well, I was really a rower. I consider myself like an endurance athlete. I was a rower at heart, and then I broke into cross training through running, and I always paddled in the ocean. I prone paddle with just my hands, no oar. But anyway, to go back to your question, I think that, well, the bonking will, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And you can be super dialed in on your nutrition. Everybody has their own take on nutrition for these endurance events. Well, last fall, I decided to get a coach, really good coach. His name is Michael McKnight. He wins a lot of these 200-mile races. He's a really great endurance runner athlete. He believes in the keto. I have tried the keto diet, and I feel like that helped me. That helped me for a while, and just sort of tone it or tap in on my glycogen and my body's response to that. Where his theory, and well, the theory he was going off of was, focus through your training, but focus on a lot of fats and high protein, and you take in some carbs, but a very low amount. And then for the actual event, you can have as many carbs as you want. So it's sort of like an afterburner or like an extra nitro fuel for your body. And doing that race in Moab, Utah, the Moab 240, I definitely felt the last 40 miles I had a lot of drive left, like, because I was sort of teaching my body. And this is just one theory, right? Everyone has their own theories, but I felt like I was teaching my body to really store the fats and the protein, and then the carbs were just that extra energy boost. So that's helped me in the past. I still will bonk. I know runners out there that have even ran 100 miles on just water, no calories. So it's possible, but I can't imagine with how their body's breaking down, which obviously is a thing. I think obviously, like the video showed too with the sports psychology, a lot of this is very mental. I always said, if you can push your mind, your body will follow kind of mindset, where, it's going to hurt and you're definitely going to feel the bonking, but if you can really survive or push through it, that will work. Like you see those bigger guys in the English Channel. Now, I'm sure there's the physiological part of it where they're bigger and their bodies can take more cold. That's how I felt in the Arctic. I felt like I did have an advantage because I had a bit more weight than some of the other participants out there. And I was able to kind of survive and actually get a podium finish that race, where I thought I wouldn't even make it 100 miles. Somehow I was able to go 9 days out there. But I think being heavier definitely sort of insulated me. Like my core was definitely cold, but it was manageable for me. So
I've always told people that since I've been a traveler since I was 16, going to Europe and other places pretty, annually or every 2 years, and spending a lot of time over there, I said, even though I wanted to be a bigger athlete, when I was 18 and 20, I fit in an airplane seat pretty well, being a 176, 6'2" and a half. And I can get into a ball and sleep because I'm flexible, I would say hyper flexible. So I gave myself a little plug on not, making it to be the linebacker size that I endeavored to be, but I'm still, as a 61-year-old, I can still dance, and sometimes the the hip hop kids who are 20 in their 20s and teens, they see me out there throwing my Michael Jackson and my hip hop stand up dancing, and they say, "Hey, man, you're doing as well as the kids at our high school or college dances," you know. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I had to grow into being happy with being the thin, flexible, ectomorph body.
That's funny you mentioned planes, because on the way to out west or wherever across the world to do some of these races, I cannot fit in a plane unless I'm getting like an aisle seat where I can stretch my legs out, or an exit row. I usually can't sleep. I'm sort of doing the roll my body into a ball and try to fit my legs in there. So I definitely experience the opposite, where I don't take naps on flights a lot.
Yeah,
So
you're a big dude. I think Muhammad
yeah.
Ali was 6'3", fight weight 212 in his prime, and then walked around as an older person at probably 230s, somewhere in there.
Right.
So if you're unless you're getting a business class or a first class, it's just not easy to be in an airplane seat for 6 or 8 hours or longer if you're going to down under like Australia or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I said the word contortionist. That's what I feel like on those flights. I'm contortionist, trying to fit because I have pretty long legs too. So I'm always trying to not bump into anybody and just, do what I can.
So we're going to give a shout out to Dan Rosnack, the healer,
Mhm.
for connecting us. And I'd be open to tap into your experience with psychology and military background in the Coast Guard and some of those other things. And then my third book, which I haven't released yet, which is called Raising a Child Athlete, ? Things You Need to Know, which is about bringing more balance and sustainable physical activity into the lives of young athletes who are oftentimes being trained excessively. Often, got a personal trainer. Imagine a 12-year-old personal trainer, chiropractor, physical therapist, sports psychologist, and then they've got their school program and their family life and maybe their spiritual life. Just quite an excessive program, which can break down a person in mind, body, or spirit. So maybe we could tap into some of that on a future conversation, Nate, if you're open to it.
Yeah, definitely, Steve. I think this whole conversation has been great, and I'm definitely open. I'm actually working on a personal training cert myself right now, and yeah, I talk to Dan probably weekly and try to pick his brain what he's doing. So I definitely, as a middle school counselor and now a pre-K counselor for 15 plus years, I definitely believe in the youth and the sports and how this could benefit them. When I go for runs with my son or hikes or just any type of movement, like I was saying earlier, is definitely, I think, something that's great for our youth and just developing them, their growth and development. So I think it all ties in. So, and I just want to say thank you. Like I definitely look forward to talking to you in the future as well.
Great. Yeah. And if you have any other people, whether they're in the therapeutic, like doctors, sports psychologists, chiropractors, sports coaches, or athletes themselves, anybody that you think might benefit from a conversation and the viewers might benefit from appearing on the Sifu Slim, the real show with Sifu Slim podcast, have them shoot me an email and we'll see if we can schedule time, because this is one of the things that lights me up, sharing these conversations, learning, talking about Edmund Hillary, talking about these sports psychologists, talking about K2 summits. You and I get to bounce ideas back and forth, and we grow. It's part of that human development thing that I think is the reason for my existence on this planet, is to develop myself to the highest and best potential I can be, and hopefully coach people and share conversations with other people so that they can learn and they can experience things that will help them in their walk on this planet. And maybe we can do that again and get another good result. What do you think?
I think that would be great, Sifu. I definitely agree. I think, again, going back to interconnectedness, I think it's all about giving back. I'm at the point where I've done a lot of these events. I've done a lot of sports my whole life, a lot of movement, and I'm all about trying to coach and share my knowledge with everyone, especially younger individuals or even someone older trying to break into it. I mean, that's missing that physical part of their life. They want to do their first 5K, to a marathon, to an ultra. I think it's all makes you a better person. And it doesn't have to be running. It could be rowing, paddling. It could be riding a boat. Anything you want to do, anything that you're passionate about. But I think movement is definitely an important aspect of our lives, mentally, spiritually, physically, and it connects us with each other. It's a human connector. So it connects us with everything, nature. So
one of the athletes I interviewed has written a book. He's a gymnast, and I'll put his name down in the comments. He and his wife, they're in their 60s, I believe. They have these battles on the ping pong table at their house in Naperville, Illinois, and they go at it. Either side could win that battle, but imagine having someone, like Naperville, Illinois, near Chicago. You're indoor living, many summers brutal and winters are brutal, right? So
right.
imagine having an activity that you can do with your significant other where you get, over an hour or 2 hours of blasting the ping pong battle, and you're almost diving for the ping pong ball in your 60s. Imagine letting all that stuff out and then going and taking a shower or going for a walk, and then somebody's cooking the dinner, somebody's cleaning up and organizing something. What a connective thing for a husband and wife to have. And they know they can do it again tomorrow. They know they can do it again Saturday. I think this is wonderful physical movement and challenges.
I agree. I think it just connects everyone, and it gives them a goal. That's what you need in life, and it's a healthy goal. You're not going to a bar. You're not going into some type of negative behavior. It's positive behavior that increases our health. It improves our health and improves our mental well-being. So there's nothing bad. There's nothing negative to say about it. It's a completely positive experience. Whether I know you mentioned ping pong. I know pickleball is a big thing now. Any type of movement. It's always going to be a positive. So
I'm going to share how people can get in touch with me, and then you can do the same. So I'm Sifu Slim, sifuslim.com or theagingathlete.com. Of course, the aging doesn't mean you're old. It means we're all aging every year. And so what I try to bring a light to is the fact that the life goals, physicality, mental ability, all these things changes through our development process and the aging process. So The Aging Athlete talks a lot about this. Got a few books out, and they're all available through my website and through Amazon. And we also ask you to like and subscribe and leave your questions and comments down below this YouTube video. Over to Nate for how to get in touch with him.
Thank you, Sifu. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. It's just my first and last name. It's Nate, Nate, and last name Dirvin. My military in me is D like Delta, I-R, V like Victor, I-N. And that's how you get a hold of me on Facebook or Instagram. I do have an article coming out. It's spiritual. It's about physical movement, but spirituality. And that's going to be in a Running World magazine in the UK. But it'll be available online, and I can put the link up on my social media when that comes out. And I do have a fundraising page. I raise money for the Coast Guard Mutual Assistance for military members and their families. So whether they need money for college, flight home, just to help them with mortgage payments or anything. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a great conversation, and I'm glad to promote health and well-being with you.
Awesome, Nate. So thanks, folks. Please like and subscribe, and I'll send Nate an email. We'll schedule another time and come at it with some different questions and comments. I appreciate it. Aloha, brother.
Aloha. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the experience.